Okay. Change tack. We'll go on to XAML functionality. It seems like I've been talking about XAML for ages without any results, because I first mentioned it 2 years ago as a conceptual direction, and last year a bit more progress. That's primarily because Microsoft's development cycle has been quite long in this area. So when they first announced their direction, we thought, this looks good to match MacroView up with. So we've just been in a sit and wait mode, seeing how the technology pans out, seeing if there's other technology appears that would be better as a direction for MacroView graphics. We spent some time on the Flash area as an option, but we still think this is the direction to go in, and we want to sit on the coattails of a behemoth like Microsoft and leverage the work they do. So it's the direction for a replacement for the MacroView graphics. So XAML is basically a graphics definition in XML. In actuality, it's any object, but we'll be using it primarily for graphic objects. It's designed by Microsoft for general purpose UI, so newer applications on Microsoft platforms will be using this technology. Our direction is to leverage it within the SCADA and process control arena. And the XAML functionality we've implemented to date is actually implemented as a MacroView Windows desktop module. So once we've finished the work to a release 1 level, it'll appear as a module in the About box, and you could click on XOps 3, or you could use XAML as a menuing system, and we've integrated both second generation MacroView graphics with the proposed third generation graphics. It's all based on Windows Presentation Foundation, which is Microsoft's new API for graphic development. There's a few example applications. I probably won't run on it because I'm probably going a bit too slow on time. We'll just stick to the MacroView side of things, but these are separate applications implemented using the same technology. New York Times Reader is basically an application that allows you to read their newspaper online, but I might run it, just see what happens. Let's see how it goes.
We've got time. It's okay, we can break.
Now, so this is leveraging the same Windows presentation functionality. If I can see it. There it is, right in front of me. It requires network access. So it loads up the newspaper for the day and is communicating. Oh, network connection error. So this is just the cache. The cache was already been down there. Already been downloaded. Now, the interesting thing about this is it uses that WPF functionality that we will be using for XAML, and all of this information is defined as objects, not bitmaps, within the Windows environment. And a lot of the graphics load is actually offloaded to the 3D graphics processor, not straight 2D. In the Win32 API that most programs currently are written in, the main processor does all the work. It decides how to draw the fonts. It tells the video card, stick this bunch of bitmaps here. While WPF takes a different approach. It leverages DirectX, which is game graphics technology, and it represents all the graphic objects as graphic objects, not bitmaps, which is similar to what MacroView is designed to do in terms of its graphics definition. And it means implementing things like scaling of fonts is a lot simpler. Scaling of fonts is done in things like Firefox and Internet Explorer 7, but the implementation below the covers is all done not by the graphics card, but by the processor. And they've got a lot of very good support for text, which we hope to also to leverage. I'll just quickly run through the Contoso sample. This is another application that's with source code. It's supposed to be a demo application from Microsoft to show what you can do with the graphics technology. So just compile and run it. Now, the interesting thing here is the use of transitions in animation, and which we hope to use in like future MacroView Navigator versions. So when you click something, there's a transition of some form, whether it's a 3D transition or a 2D transition, just to make the user interface a bit more polished. So, and so it did that 3D transition, and that's all sort of handled by the graphics subsystem. The developer, there's work to do to implement that sort of thing, but the developer has a lot less work than they would have if they were using pre-Windows Presentation Foundation technology. If you notice to the left, you see that window that appears to be on an angle like that. That's not just a bitmap. That's actual form technology, and it's clickable. So if I click on this guy, say you had a DGT or a XAML file in the future with MacroView graphics, you could do something like that. So have a menu page and rotate it, flip it left, and the menu page was defined in 2D, but it's appearing in 3D. It's just the sort of things that they're aiming for with this functionality. So let's. To just give you an idea. So this is the type of thing we're aiming for. And that's an example WPF application. Okay. Let me see where we're at. I can go through this separately if we've got time later on today, but we'll move on with the rest of the presentation. Now,
do you want to stop now for coffee? And then, because this is like the next section, isn't it? This is the XAML stuff.
Yeah.
Let's have coffee now, sure. And then we'll do that, and then Mark's talk. So just the toilets are just as you go out, and then you've got the smoke. The smoking areas down the stairs, out that. There's not downstairs. 2 kilometres. 2 kilometres.
All the way over to
all the way over to the old Brian smoke. So if you want to smoke, go Brian, and he'll be more than happy to show you what it is. Okay, we'll come back in say 15 minutes at 22. 22:11.
That's why I sat there. So I get bored, shut up, Brett.
Okay, where was I? That's right. One of the packages that have been built using WPF technology is called Microsoft's Expression Interactive Designer. And what they're trying to do with this package is when you ever develop a Windows application, you've got your programmers, and then you've got the graphic designer, making things look pretty and usable, etc. And they're looking at separating those two roles, and having a tight integration between the two. So a designer, instead of mocking up a screen in, say, Photoshop or whatever, not Photoshop, what's the other Adobe package? Anyway, any one of those that's it's just a view of what they'd like to do, but it's then limited to what the programming environment can do. This is a tight integration between a Visual Studio package and the graphics developed by a designer. It's sort of almost analogous to a graphic developer for MacroView, in that you're dealing mostly with look and feel, and not as much in raw programming code. As part of our looking towards the future, we're looking towards leveraging off a third-party component to do the graphic editing in XAML. We don't really want to write that from scratch. It'll be too large a task. So Interactive Designer is one possible package we could leverage if they release an API for it. But regardless, we've actually developed a basic XAML graphic that connects to a MacroView server within this environment, and Mark will run through that with you. this is just an example of the XAML. So you have DGT now, which is a text file format. XAML is the same analogous concept, except the source graphic files are in XML. And to define a MacroView XAML file, there needs to be a header that actually loads in the appropriate objects associated with it. The objects are things like script objects and value objects. And then within the graphic definitions in the XML, in this example there's an ellipse. It's got its fill, its width, its size, its gradients, its colours defined in the XML, but we can attach an arbitrary object to it in the data context property, and that's what's highlighted in the middle of the screen there. And within that data context property, we've put our own objects. And this example is a metascript. The M prefix is a shortening for metascript, and then there's the script object. And there's an example of a simple script. In the middle of the script, you've got the ampersand LT. That's just a HTML or XML code for less than. If we're using a graphic editor, that you wouldn't see that. You just see the less than symbol. But if you're looking at the raw XAML file, any of those special HTML characters or XML characters, such as less than, greater than, because they're part of the XML tags, need to be escaped out with that sequence. And in this particular scenario, the metascript's returning red or transparent. And that's a straight string to describe the colour rather than a colour code. That's currently done in MacroView. And you can group within the XAML multiple scripts into one object. That's required because the data context property only takes one object. And in this scenario, you combine one property of a graphic to one script, another property to another script. The XAML is like a big tree of information. At the top level, you've got the screen, then you've got n objects, and each object can have n objects within it, and each object can have its own graphic properties like colour, position, size, etc. So that's the engine room of the XAML functionality. Where we'll be looking at having a graphic editor to hide that detail, similar to the way MacroView Studio and DGT files work currently. So our graphics direction is XAML and WPF for graphics on Windows. That will be the case regardless, because that's the best platform to develop graphics for Windows systems, whether they be Windows servers or Windows clients. We'll be developing a XAML module for MacroView Windows Desktop so that we can display XAML graphics within that environment. Now, we definitely want to keep our Unix Linux focus. We don't want to lose that. The reason we're doing all this .NET development is purely because it's just so developer efficient. In terms of bang for your development buck, it is the way to go. Now, we've been watching .NET on Linux in terms of the Mono project, and that's coming along nicely, but it always lags the Windows scenario by 12 to 18 months, depending on the functionality area. So if this technology just stays on Windows, we'll stick with MacroView graphics on Windows being WPF, and on the Unix servers and Linux servers we're going to have to look for a different option. But if there's a new package called WPF-E that Microsoft haven't even released a CTP for, and the E stands for everywhere. And if you are familiar with Flash on web pages takes up a portion of the page in a rectangular area, and behind that is a series of it's a small virtual machine running Flash bytecode. WPF is the same sort of thing except for .NET and XAML. And the reason they suffixed it with the everywhere suffix is because they want to have it available on Mac and Linux. And when that's released, we'll look at it, and if it's a suitable implementation for Linux, that will be the basis for MacroView graphics across the board. So Linux, Windows, etc. It will be a cut down version of the Windows WPF graphics, mainly missing in terms of the 3D area. But I can see that changing over time because they're going to try and make this initial release as small as possible so they can compete with Flash. So the downloads in terms of the initial download to set it up in the first place is small, 2 to 3 megabytes, rather than 20 megabytes for .NET 2.0 or .NET 3.0. Yeah, and so we're waiting on that, and that will change our development path. But if it is suitable for Linux, it's bang on for our plans because it all fits together. And we'll have similar graphics on Linux and MacroView. I'll be able to say more about that in the next user group. Yeah, we're on the lookout for third-party components, charting components, graphic editors to leverage the functionality without doing all the development ourselves. Okay, before we go to questions, what I'm going to do is pass it over to Mark just to do a summary of the progress he's made with using XAML from an end-user perspective rather than a development perspective. There we go. I'll just start this off, and Mark can take over.
Well, basically, I just started playing with graphics editors and just trying to get a feel for the XAML environment. We looked at using XAML for the graphics and just to see if they were powerful enough and sort of what we could use. We had to utilise all third-party software tools, and we wanted to have a look at the functionality using it for a SCADA environment and see if we get real-time data coming back to the XAML file. Tools we used were the interactive designer. The graphic designer is nice. It's a little bit, gives you a bit more power in designing graphics. There's some nice tools in there, whereas the interactive designer has some editing tools, but it's slightly limited. I was using Vim for searching within the XAML file to change the script. XAML is another text editor that will allow for live viewing of your changes, and we've got the MacroView XAML runner. All the XAML tools are at a beta stage, so when I first started playing with them they were fairly average. The last release was in September and it made a big difference. There's still quite a few bugs in there, but to actually create a graphic was not too bad. Didn't give me a headache. So it's a nice design environment, and I'll just show you the graphics. So this is a graphics designer that I used. And these are some gauges. I replicated the ones that were done in Flash, but these I didn't import these. These were created from scratch. To do the gauge probably took about 15-20 minutes, I suppose. The interactive designer has a nice, Applon doesn't think so, but I think it is nice. When you load it, it
It's the right button. Tricky mouse.
when you load it, it actually asks to connect, and you can, as you make changes, you can see the changes you make live, and it will talk to the server. And it's nice because XAML is still a text file, so it's still the same as a DGT. It's all similar. I'll just show you XAML is, you don't lose any resolution when you scale. This is one that would come off the web, And as you can see, it's scalable and you don't lose any resolution. The graphics are very pleasing to the eye. It's a lot cleaner than the existing MacroView graphics. The XAML files will reside on the server. XAML, from what I've found, as a SCADA tool, it's very powerful. Everything I tried to do, I was able to do, and there's a lot more. If you have a bit of a browse on the web, they've done quite a bit. This is part of what Applin was talking about for the Windows desktop. This is just a separate part of it, the XAML runner. And if I load up, done it. This will connect to a MacroView server. And in this, I've just utilised time to change the objects. So basically, all these graphics I created using the graphic designer. The clock probably took me about 20 minutes and another 10 minutes to add the data to it, bind the data, and the rest of it, yeah, I only had a few days, so I didn't keep much track of time.
Very much show them now. Okay, so
So
the valve comes on, fills up the tank, and that little water spout out there is transparent, so you can see the tank behind it. When it fills up, that turns off, the other pump runs, fills that up, and the pump goes green when it's running and red when it's stopped, and when it empties, the other pump starts. The gauges at the top right hand side are animated for amps, and if you see the amps, they go high there, and then that pump trips out on overload, and it'll flash an alarm and it'll give you the text. So that's what we put together for this, Mark did that. Can you show them in Interactive Designer that it's live?
I think that's the next one. Alright, and while I was doing it, I started creating a parts library for all the parts that I was doing. So this is where it's all still live within the Interactive Designer.
So as you're creating graphics, things are updating at the same time.
So down here I've added reference XAML files, and these files are just the parts that I've added. So from graphic to graphic, it's quite easy to, you can select copy, and I can paste it into here. By grouping these, there is a bit of an issue with group. I found that you can group, but you can't ungroup, and if you ungroup it within the text, it's not happy.
You can see it's updating live already.
So the value is live. This is scalable. If you save this file.
So will the user see that, or is it only after it's been saved?
No, so I've saved that, and if they were looking at this page by refresh,
Yep.
it's there, and you're not losing any resolution on the graphic. That's something nice about XAML. And then same by, I mean, it's a fairly nice environment. There's no, it's just a save and a refresh, and you're there. And the file size, that graphic there is about 250k, so it's fairly small in the scheme of things. And it's better than existing HMI technology using bitmaps. You don't have any resolution problems, compiling problems. It's just save and it's there. So. Any questions? Ask up.
So, we're not going to be trying to sell you XAML straight away. This is just showing you the direction. We're pacing ourselves in terms of the graphics, making the jumps where it makes the most sense and where we get the most leverage. Any questions? Is it all just too much?
I had a question about the colours. Like you mentioned, you're using a string name or a basic name like red for colour.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I'm assuming that you've got multiple different types of red.
Yes. You'll have RGB and A. So red, green, blue, and A for transparency. And so you can actually encode those raw values in there. Or there's a huge set of names, like all the variations of colour in names. Just
if you try one line and line return line, so
yeah. So there's the whole bunch of descriptions of red, golden rod, yellow. I don't know. But you can use those, or you can use the RGBA values.
You can customise something if you want to, or otherwise there's a predefined.
Yep. Name for it.
Very big set of.
Yep.
It won't be stuck to 16 colours and then having to define the other ones.
And the benefit of transparency is you can start to overlay things and still not lose what's behind totally. See through it in terms of information. I mean, with Windows Vista, they're going to use a lot of what's called the glass effect in their UI, and that's a bit of, is that beneficial? Some scenarios it probably is beneficial. Probably in most, it's not, but it's there for you to use if you choose to.
Also, you can grow and shrink almost any object. So you can have something small, and if something happens to it, an entity attribute change will cause it to grow and shrink, and there's almost no limitation in terms of what you can do.
Would you also be able to change the transparency based on a variable?
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Also, the transparency is 02552
Yeah.
or whatever.
02552. Yeah.
What about the hardware platforms? What's that running on there?
That's running on the latest and greatest, basically. It's an onboard video card, so that's pretty basic.
Yeah.
But the reason we decided to run it on a Core 2 machine for this demo was because it's running VMware with a Linux server on it. It's running a MacroView configuration on the Linux machine and the Windows machine. So you've got the historization going on both those machines. You've got the meta servers starting up and stopping as required. And then we've got Camtasia recording the video. So it's doing a lot. I'd say most modern machines wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, you get purchasing cycles probably every 2 to 3 years you get new machines.
Yeah.
If you had a purchasing cycle in the last year or so, year and a half, I have no problem with this. 2.8 gigahertz, almost said megahertz then, shows how old I am. Pentiums are fine.
We've run this XAML runner on some older machines in the office, and it's been absolutely, look, this is not really working it too hard, but it hasn't had the speed problem.
So can we convert our current MacroView's graphic directly to XAML?
Excellent question. At this stage, no. But when we get to the point we actually want to start giving it out to people, yes, for sure.
Kim, it's quite similar.
Yeah, the concepts.
Amazingly, the DGT and the XAML, it's different, but it's not like a bitmap or anything like that. We use objects and stuff like that in MacroView, which is exactly how XAML talks to it.
There'd be a similar type converter, like
Yes.
the old DXF to DGT.
Yep. In fact, the MacroView Studio implementation, where it loads a DGT and displays it in a graphic editor, we've got a set of code that reads and writes DGTs right there. And so all it will be reading the DGT into objects, mapping it to XAML objects. Now that's not going to be, there's some concepts that are different in terms of layout and colours. We'll have to have some sort of mapping table. But yeah, we'll be writing a converter. We don't have one yet, but I don't see it as a big issue.
That leads to the question, how long till we can play with something like this? Is there plans afoot yet?
Well, last year's user group I mentioned a few things we're aiming for, and I didn't achieve them, so we'll probably not commit too much. But probably a year's time, it'll be at the level MacroView Windows Desktop is now.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And the handles were turning on the valves, but we had some resolution issues, so they stopped working.
Yeah. The resolution issues were to do with layout. So the layout in XAML, there's a whole bunch of different options. So traditional MacroView, the layout is purely a relative sizing. So if you stretch something, it stretches in both the X and the Y. With XAML, you've got a series of different layout options which can get very confusing. We'll be, in whatever graphic editor technology we choose, we'll be using the straight scaling as the default. And if you want to do some advanced stuff, you can do the other layout. What I mean by layout, so you've got a Windows program which has a form and you stretch it, and say parts of the form increase but other parts just move. That's the sort of thing we'll be able to do.
If you scale that window down, the top tank shouldn't scale properly, whereas the rest does.
Yeah. And this is all new stuff. We're working out the kinks, and because it's designed as a general purpose graphics technology, some things just don't make sense for us from the skater wheel. For example, rectangles. To be able to use it as a bar graph, we'd like to just increase the height, link it to a metascript, and keep the origin at some point. There's no concept for that in XAML. So we're going to add that. It's part of our value add. What Mark had to do was effectively calculate both the height and the position to get a bar graph that increases from the bottom rather than from the top.
I ended up cheating and using that's Microsoft control the normal progress bar.
Oh, okay. Use the progress bar instead of a rectangle. Okay, cool. Yeah. But that's the sort of thing we can add. Like we can add our own graphic objects to make it easy to do the sort of things we do often, as opposed to a general purpose programmer doesn't do often.
So the view is just to become the future navigator?
Yeah, that's another step. We'd probably, we'd probably actually have a hard-coded navigator where the XAML is compiled to a program. This is what's called loose XAML. Loose XAML is a .xaml file on the file system which you load at runtime. Compiled XAML is actually built into an executable. So any future XAML will be compiled XAML.
For conversion of graphics, how would this go against your object-oriented or like some of the DCSs use? Particularly I'm looking at CMCS3. So I think they use just a straight object file, because at the moment we have no way of converting those CMCS3.
Doug, can you help me out with this?
I believe that the Centum, the ones we do convert, the Centum CS ones,
That would work.
are the Linux ones. We've never actually, and Yokogawa are not too keen to give us what their file format is. I mean, we haven't spent too much time being and pleading, but I don't believe it would be. I believe that they're all Windows-based text files, so we could probably convert them and run them, but it wouldn't be a trivial task depending on how much information Yokogawa gives us. If Yokogawa gives us the spec and we don't have to reverse engineer it, it won't be too bad. If you have to reverse engineer it, would be a tough ask.
Okay, I might end it here. If you've got any other questions, we can chat during the breaks. We'll move on to the next presentation. Yeah,
Chris, yep.